I am Rob Swanson, and these are David Coffin's 20 Principles for Effective Argumentation. I believe all 20 of these are top tier considerations for discussion. Please print them out and make notations as we go along. Pause this video to collect yourself to write down some notes. Let's get started. Number one, the principle of humility. I'm not going to read the statement here. You have that before you. This is a hubris check. Before we engage in any kind of discussion, we just have to think about, is it necessary from my point of view to prevail here? That which applies to me, does it apply to everybody? And must it? Just check it, In most cases, not the case. I combine boldness with humility and openness with an emphasis on humility and openness as I engage in discussion. Number two, judgment of clarity. Assume the best and most honorable motives on the part of my neighbor. I don't know the motives behind what my neighbor is saying at the present time. And I may never know what that person is thinking. That's fine. I just postpone my judgment. I contain my hunches. Let's just carry on with the discussion. Number three, Gerstner's law. Do not debate a point of contention until you can state the other person's to their satisfaction. That cannot be done without listening, practice, anticipate getting it wrong, but work on it. It's very, very helpful to state the other person's position in a way that is satisfying to them. Number four, seek common ground. Attempt to establish common ground with your opponent as a starting point for the discussion. And this is the art of discussion. Obviously, people are way to the left, way to the right. A good discussion can find the common points, the central trunk of the tree from which one person veered one way and another veered another place. Find that common ground rather than just accentuate the differences. Number four, the Socratic principle. Follow the argument where it leads. The point is not merely to defend our side, but to attempt to establish the truth of a matter. Back to listening once again. Not only listening, but writing out, thinking through and writing down what we've heard with patience. Be very eager to say, I'll get back to you on that. Very quick to curtail reaction because we're all in the process of discovery and learning. Number six, status verbum. Establish the meaning and use of terms of the argument, especially those essential to the point at issue, thus avoiding useless logomachy. Love that word, huh? Logomachy, charged or unclear words. It does absolutely no use to tell somebody who doesn't know the vocabulary some judgment. I could say that person is a fascist. What good is saying that if people don't know what fascism is? Or if you know what fascism is, maybe you don't know what a Fabian is. Don't bring it up. Not an important point. Useless logomachy. You never want to say something with the other person going, huh? What's that? I once was in a discussion with someone in a counseling relationship where I said, well, the man here is acting as the sovereign of his home. And the person I was talking to just flipped out. What do you mean sovereign? He's not sovereign. And of course, I meant one thing. They were thinking another. So we have to define our terms. Number seven, constantly work to establish and clarify the statement of question at issue. What is and what is not. Why are we talking about this? What's the point? Why is this valuable? Again, it's just good to keep everything in context. Number eight, charitable interpretation. Always attempt to understand and restate your opponent's arguments in the best possible light until and unless he specifically denies such interpretation. In other words, ratchet back from the extremes. Get something that is a simple declaration of agreement, and then ratchet it up or maybe try to lead the other person down the slippery slope where you think they might be heading if they continue with that line of discussion. I've had so many examples of this. For instance, as one person wanted to talk to me about hell. Again, my background is ministry. They wanted to talk about hell. I didn't want to talk about hell. Bad place to begin. I'd be very interested in talking about theological points of conditional immortality or annihilationism, but instead I thought, let's just talk about judgment. Is there such a thing as judgment? And that, for me, was a good beginning place for a discussion. I think in the pro-life and pro-choice realms, they are renowned for violating this point. Pro-choice people need to acknowledge, I know you care about women. Pro-life people need to say to their pro-choice friends, I know you don't want to kill a baby. And then work from there. See where the discussion leads. Number 9, the objective stance. Avoid charging your opponent with various errors. Rather, charge the arguments. Remember, it's always good to refer to an it and not to a them. Not that they are mistaken, but the point may be mistaken. I recently was told by somebody that in the Bible that Mary Magdalene was really Mary of Bethany. I didn't say you're wrong. I said I didn't know that. I've never heard that before. So I guess we both have to do some study right now to find the identity of Mary Magdalene, and was she indeed a separate person from Mary of Bethany? No point to disagree on that. We can all do some homework. Number 10 is public confession, and showing a willingness to admit error, ignorance, or misunderstanding. Public confession. So many people have strong opinions about political leaders, but haven't we all been misled by political leaders? I know in my case, I trusted Robert McNamara when I was a young man. If he said something, he said it convincingly, and then 30 years later he comes out and says he was lying to us back in the 60s. And, didn't we all feel a bit betrayed when we learned what we learned about weapons of mass destruction? If we've been wrong before, we're going to be wrong again. So show willingness to admit error. The Freudian fallacy, don't confuse grounds with motives. Basically, stay away from you statements. That's charging a person with some motives we don't need to do. Number 12, never leave a point at issue once it is established unless it is settled. It's always good to take a look at data. And oftentimes there's not just one sense of data proving your point, but there's two sets of data, things that are for and against. Well, let's look at it all. A common illustration of this would be climate change and the rise of the oceans. One person can bring up about the flow of the Atlantic currents. Okay. Another person could say Miami is being very vulnerable to storms now. Okay. Another person would say that the oceans have risen 8 inches since 1880. Not quite a cataclysmic rate, and they haven't really been increasing all that much. Okay. Let's just get our data down. Data before persuasion, before conclusions, always. Let's get our points established before we move forward. Number 13, premise by premise. Don't be afraid of interrupting a person for the purpose of clarifying or questioning. Let's just check. Some person says public education is not as good as it used to be. Whoa! Slow down. What do you mean public education is not as good as what it used to be? Let's check our facts. Number 14, hypothetical pause. Don't be afraid to propose or accept temporarily a premise not agreed upon for the purpose of illustration. And again, this point is to shorten the extremes between one position and another person. One person can say building a border wall between the United States and Mexico will not work. Okay, that sounds pretty conclusive. Back it up. Why? Why do you say that? Let's. There are many implications here. My brain's going fast. I don't want to get into all the implications of accepting asylum seekers and anybody crossing and the implications of that. What's the implications of taking in the people who want to come to our country? Number 15, wouldn't you say? The wouldn't you say method is used for joint analysis, not to condemn or to pontificate a particular point. Wouldn't you say? And then I'm saying my point. No, if I say that, it's only to keep the discussion going, one statement at a time for analysis. The football fan says, wouldn't you say defense wins championships? All right, that's a discussion point. Let's go. I'm not saying anything about it. I'm not defending a point. You could say, wouldn't you say gluten is harmful? Well, we can talk about that. Gluten is a protein. What makes that particular protein harmful? Let's talk about that. Wouldn't you say owning a Rottweiler is dangerous? Okay, maybe yes, maybe no. But let's approach all of these matters with a good motive. Number 16 is the let's think about that tactic. Don't merely respond to an assertion without a counter assertion. To think through a premise. I remember when my son was a teenager, 17 years old, he came home and he said, "Dad, I'm going to buy a car, a Cadillac. It doesn't have a battery, $400. And I said to him, Tom, how much does it cost to buy a $400 car? And we got that cost all the way up to $1,800. I have a friend who had a daughter who said, I'm going to get an apartment in Boston. And the father said, you're going to get an apartment in Boston? Do you know the costs? Do you know what the electric bill would be? And she said, electric bill? Hey, I'm going to complete this list on the next video, so please look to Argumentation Part 2 as I'll complete this. Time is running out. I got another list that I want to share with you. So let's continue on with Part 2, Out of Discussion, Principles of Argumentation.